You know, I had said I probably wasn't going to make videos on Sunday, and here I am. I wanted to comment on something a little. And this isn't the first time I've heard this argument presented, but it pretty much showed itself in force, to say the least. Let me turn the camera just a little bit. Looks like it moves on me a little bit. And it has to do with Socialist Jesus. In case you were wondering, no, I do not believe Jesus was a socialist by any stretch. In fact, he was quite the opposite of a socialist. Because he's Christianity fundamentally is an individualist religion, and the collectivism in socialism pretty much works. You're supposed to be baptized away from that, but people still seem to think that collectivist ideologies are virtuous, and it's kind of scary, actually, seeing how many people just completely misunderstand. So, Marco Rubio tweeted, "Not every Democrat is a socialist, but every socialist is a Democrat." That's dumb, Marco. That's dumb. It's not true, one. But I get what you're trying to say, but that's dumb. It's too easy to get dunked on. And some people were saying stupid stuff. Oh, not every Republican's a racist, but every racist is a Republican. Like, you can just hear the layers of stupidity just, in the comments. Just imagine, and it's probably there. That comment probably exists. But this one caught me by, not that I haven't heard this before, but it was kind of assertive for even the subject. So not every Jesus was a socialist, but Jesus Christ was a socialist. No. Absolutely not. And I just said he most definitely was not. And, 5 likes, and I got ratioed hard. Because, I'm actually in the hidden replies. Because it's apparently what I say is harmful or potentially harmful. So that sucks. But that means that basically the angry leftists, they all get to just pile on and think that they actually are making a point here. When it seems like none of them actually understand the basics of Christianity, it's kind of disturbing. So he says, I'm just going to kind of hit these one by one and just comment about them. Let's think about this. Love thy neighbor, help the poor, do unto others as you would do unto you, feed the hungry. He did by filling baskets with fish. He went after the wealthy. He healed the sick, and so on and so on. He was a socialist. First of all, he never went after the wealthy. He did do these things here, but he never went after the wealthy. He called for the wealthy to follow him as he called for the poor to follow him. It was the same calling. It never was. He dunked on power far more often than he never dunked on anybody because they were wealthy or because of their class. He just said, "Follow me." And he didn't force anybody to do so. He didn't say your followers have to go seize the wealth from the wealthy and then redistribute it to the poor or whatever. No such thing. So where they think he went after the wealthy, most people try to cite a couple passages. One about it's harder for a rich man to get into the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. And there's, of course, more subtlety and interpretation in that. I think it's about time we revisit the original Greek printing and then translate it to English, because the English Bible's pretty. It's missing a lot of context and a lot of flavor. That kind of sets things, because it's not the first language it's translated from. It's like 2 or 3 down the line. So the English Bible's got a lot of problems. But what he wasn't talking about was saying if you're wealthy, you can't. That makes you not a good person. It's more of in the structure of what he's talking about. Is basically, basically the more you have, the harder it is to give things up to God. Basically, to be able to pay the toll to get in, you have to, you have to not be as attached to earthly things. And you got to remember, back in the day, your things were kind of everything. Your kingdom, your wealth. It was. You think stuff was split now? No, it was pretty much either you were dirt poor or you were some sort of royalty. It didn't really go either way, and whatever. So this guy, But what disturbs me about this is that he says he was a socialist because he said love thy neighbor. Oops, let me go back. Nothing in socialism says love thy neighbor, and that is also not unique. If you want to claim that's a socialist belief, it's not unique to socialism. In fact, capitalism is dependent on this because you basically, it's a virtuous society is the society that prospers. So I don't understand like where this comes from. Help the poor, do unto others as you would do unto you. Yes, but that's not socialism, though. Socialism has to do with not helping the poor as much as redistributing wealth to an entire class of people who are considered poor, prop them up, and you can argue whether that helps them or not. I would say it does not help them. But helping the poor itself, in terms of a general term, that is not by any means unique to socialism. Capitalism raises people out of poverty. You could say feudalism. It's the responsibility of the king to make sure his peasants are well fed and helped. This is not a unique concept. I don't understand where these people are getting off saying that is uniquely socialist. Do unto others as you would do unto you. Where in any socialist manifesto from Marx or anybody is that even approached? It doesn't make any like what is he talking about? This is just a principle that it's a societal principle, but it's not something that has to do with an economic system. Heal the sick and so on and so on. He healed the sick. Yes, he did. But you know what he didn't do? He didn't go basically say, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to see all the rich people. We're going to go take a good amount of their money, and we're going to just take it by them by force, and then we're going to try to give it to people, or we're not going to give it to people. We're going to pay for their health care. Going to pay me to go then heal the sick. There's nothing like that. Jesus just goes out and just heals the sick on his own accord. Nobody forces him to do it, and he doesn't force anybody else to do it. He just basically says, follow me, do what I'm doing. Not go complain and go vote in somebody who will then take the money from the person you don't like to give it towards things like healing the sick or feeding the hungry or whatever. It's the same exact thing with feeding hungry. It's like he also said, shelter the or clothe the naked and shelter the displaced or whatever it was. Those are things we should do as people. Those are responsibilities we have. It doesn't say you have a right to not be hungry. You have a right to be healed. You have a right to somebody else's labor. And Jesus never at any point said, rob the store to feed the hungry, because feeding the hungry is so much more important than basically somebody's personal rights. It was freely give of yourself and give of your own wealth. Otherwise, you're not really giving. You're just basically paying the tax, which is not necessarily a good thing. So I don't understand. And the thing is, what I don't get about this is that, what are these people being taught about capitalism, that feeding the hungry, helping the poor, healing the sick, like that these are somehow contrary to capitalist beliefs. The capitalist belief system is very much to do all these things, but what it's not is to use basically the arm of the government to seize the means of production to go try to engineer people's virtue by basically man's imperfect design. It calls for an abundance of wealth, a growing economy, a growing lower classes, class mobility, and then the ability of the people to then decide how that they're best going to, as individuals, take care of the people who actually need it. It has nothing to do with it. Basically, it leaves people to take their money and follow Jesus with it, or do whatever they're going to do with it, rather than just collecting it and then shaving off some of it for the bureaucrats and then running a really terrible healthcare system or something. I don't know what they're taught about. This doesn't even explain what socialism is, and it's somehow leveled as a criticism of capitalism. Very strange. So what was it? He was teaching people that a society and their leaders should give everything they can to help others. No, he never once says anything about society. He never once said, basically it's the responsibility of the leaders to go do stuff. It was you as an individual, whether you're wealthy, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, whether you're in power, whether you're not in power, you as an individual have that responsibility. There isn't a collective responsibility, like the government being virtuous and taking money from somebody and giving it to somebody else so that they can afford whatever, a loaf of bread or whatever. That's not virtue. That's not following Christ. In fact, that does nothing for you as an individual. Doesn't work also, but it also does nothing for your individual salvation. You're not just because you're a part of society that tries to implement these things doesn't mean you're collectively virtuous. And I don't understand where they're getting this from, or I should say, I do kind of understand. It's just that I saw it as basically, a Catholic who's growing up in my father's clergy. I've seen this a lot, this argument from Catholics. I did go to college and whatnot, so like it's a reason. There's a reason 60% of Catholics vote for Democrats, and it has to do with this virtue trap, where it's they lay these things down like be compassionate to the poor and the sick and all this other stuff, and then they tie those things to policies which involve basically the government seizing those things and then redistributing them in some form or some program. We should know better, but I understand where it's coming from there. But I guess I'm seeing it on all kinds of different from lots of different people. Some people do it in a mocking way. They just say, "Oh well, he gave to the poor, therefore he's a socialist." It's like, no, actually, if you look at capitalist countries, they give far more to the poor. The poor live far better. The charity is abundant. The more capitalistic a society is, and the more central commanded it is, the more socialistic, the less, not only the less are they able to take care of people, but the less people are able to actually give of their own accord. It's not virtuous to say, I'm going to give 15% of my wealth to X cause, and then say, you know what, I like that, and I think that's such a good thing. I'm going to pass a law so that I give a certain amount, and then my neighbor, he doesn't want to give as much, but now he has to by law because it's our responsibility to take care of these people. No, it's you as an individual's responsibility. It is not no longer virtue if you go take the government and you go use them to basically seize somebody else's stuff and then redistribute it. That's not virtue. If you wanted to, if you wanted actual virtue, you would, do what it takes to basically encourage people to give freely, not threaten them with the force of government, because that's not virtue. And at no point does Christ say, I hate to say this is where Christ is different than Muhammad. And I get myself in trouble comparing the two, but at no point does Christ say basically follow me, or the hand of the law goes down, or my followers go out and force people to convert and force people to give a certain amount of tithe. And also, never once does Jesus say anything like that. That has to do with forcing people or enacting a society that does something collectively. Never. It's all about you reaching inside of yourself and deciding if you're going to follow Christ or not. That's what it's about. It has nothing to do with this collective action nonsense. It is not virtuous for them to tax me and then redistribute my money to causes that they think are beneficial, even if it is framed as helping the poor, clothing people or whatever. That's not what virtue is. That's it's quite literally the opposite of virtue. It's false virtue, because you're not giving of yourself. You're literally, whether you're voting or whether you're just taking it by force. You're taking it by force if you vote for the government to take it by force. And that's not virtue. Just because, the ends are, Johnny got a loaf of bread on his table that he might not have anyway. The fact you essentially force somebody to give that to him, that is not virtue. And there's, going to be an argument about whether that even works or not. I certainly don't believe it's nearly as effective as just allowing people to prosper, allowing people to get out of poverty, and not having this class warfare crap, and also allowing people to give freely and to help others freely. If we have free discussion and we encourage people to follow Christ, which apparently isn't cool anymore. So they, then maybe there would be more people willing to, give their time and money to go do things that are virtuous. But when you have these other people who are saying that, like, basically they're so compassionate that they are going to vote in people in the government who are going to stick a gun to your head to make you be as virtuous as they are, suddenly the tone changes, and that's not really what Christianity is. So it was a Middle Eastern refugee that gave out free food and health care and told people that to pay their taxes and treat everybody equally. He never said anything about basically, treat everybody equally. We know that. That's exactly what capitalism is. Socialism does not treat people equally because it divides people into classes. It divides people into hierarchies of needs. That's what socialism is. Okay, so I don't know how they're tying that to socialism. As for him being a Middle Eastern refugee, they fled from Egypt and they had the king. They notice how they say Middle Eastern and not Jewish, because if you say he was Jewish, then like suddenly that's like a, the really far left, the collectivist left, are like, oh, the Islamic left, they're not cool with that. He gave out free food and health care. He gave it out himself. He did not say Romans seize from the wealthy and give to the poor. And this is the whole idea that basically, like, if you're not enacting a society or a government to go steal from someone else and force the redistribution to people who you think needs it more, then you're, somehow unvirtuous, or you somehow don't think that the people who need for food or healthcare or housing deserve it, because you're not willing to, because you're not willing to force somebody else to help you, feed the hungry. There's no point in the Bible where Jesus conscripts anybody to help him feed the hungry or heal somebody, or he asks of, and people come to rise to the occasion. Sometimes they do not rise to the occasion, and that's okay. He doesn't he doesn't smite them or punish them. He just says, follow me. If you're not ready, I'm doing what I'm doing. And I don't know where these people get off acting like somebody giving out charity is somehow socialism, because they're not. They're quite, although they technically have the same goals, the methods in which they're doing it are completely different and completely morally opposed to each other. Again, one's individualist and one's collectivist. Have you actually read the Bible? Yeah. He did exactly those things. No, he gave... See, this is somebody who didn't even read what my response was. He gave freely. He didn't demand the Romans or wealthy that they be forced to abide by his virtue. Quite the opposite. And let's see. Jesus supported riots. Did he? When was this? He literally when he was being taken to his death by essentially unfairly and with a pretty corrupted political legal process, and his followers fought back. He literally said, "Stop! Basically, don't attack the arresting soldiers or officers, essentially, and I'm going to face this nonviolently." Quite the opposite of a riot. Yeah, you religious people should really learn to talk more about your own religion. If justify your own prejudices. There's no prejudice here. It's just that Jesus isn't a socialist. That's not a prejudice thing to say. He went to a tax collector and destroyed his office. What? I'm not. Is he talking about the money changers in the temple? Basically, the fact that they were, desecrating his house by essentially wheeling and dealing. It's more of a decor complaint than anything. It's I don't understand where this guy gets off telling me, you religious people, like what is this? Like what is he being told? Stephen Colbert is a good example of basically the Catholic who thinks that they're holier than thou. And it's not going to be a Christian nation. It doesn't help the poor either. No, we do. And this is, I don't understand why it would be selfish to to want to keep what you make and give it freely. Why that would be selfish, but ordering the government to go seize stuff from somebody else so that it can be redistributed according to your virtuous design, that's not selfish. That's absolutely selfish, because now you don't have to, it's no longer your responsibility because you have the government going and doing it. It's that's extremely selfish. Love and serve the poor. I don't like what is he talking about? That like because we don't vote for socialism, that means we can't be Christian. It's I mean, that's just bad theology. I mean, that's heretical, basically. I don't know where these people get off. I don't know where this collectivist Christianity is coming from. And the other thing he's saying, you religious people. So I take it this guy isn't religious. So then he actually has absolutely, so how does he have any idea what what Jesus is all about? It doesn't make any sense that like somebody even has the gall to come out and criticize in that way. It's very strange. So let's see. It looks like there was a bigger chain, and it looks like I got blocked because there was a lot more to say. My notifications were exploding with people saying stuff. And let's see. Nope. See, it looks like I'll click notifications. This guy, long text. Yeah. A socialist is not defined by whether they push their political ideas on everyone around them or not. That's how you define a political junkie from anywhere on the spectrum. What? And that's in response to me saying he gave freely. I don't think anybody, because there's multiple things going on here, because there's basically, you've got the people who don't understand what socialism is. They just don't. They think basically socialism is taking care of the poor and sick, and capitalism is ignoring the poor and sick. It's no, not at all. In fact, the socialism takes care of the poor and sick much worse than a capitalistic system does, because the socialistic system locks them into where they are, and it might technically solve an immediate problem, but it creates unbelievable long-term damage. It doesn't even usually solve immediate problems that well anyway. We saw what central planning did for just the freaking pandemic itself. I mean, the Soviet Union, they were as socialist as it gets, and they couldn't, they fed their people by taking basically food, redistributing food from the Ukrainians and starving millions of Ukrainians out. That's how that system works. It's completely parasitic. It doesn't mean just because you have a government program trying to do something virtuous doesn't mean that the government is virtuous. I mean, Hezbollah does charity action and stuff like that too. That doesn't make them, virtuous. In fact, you could say in basically really strict Islamist countries, you have to by law give money to the mosque. It's like a tithing. I think it's like 10 or 5%, depending on where you're at. You tithe your income straight to the church, and then the mosque decides how it's going to redistribute it. And in Christianity, that's not how that's supposed to work. You can tithe if you want to, but Jesus never says basically, tithe. But and if you find somebody who doesn't want to tithe, force them to tithe. Because there's like a big difference between saying like I think everybody should help and do as I'm doing, versus saying that we must make it required that everyone help. That to the force of literally taking somebody's freedom away, whether you're basically taking their wealth or you're taking their you're throwing them in prison, taking their time, compelling them to work. That's nothing like that is anywhere to be found in Christ's teachings. And these people, they every time you talk about that, it's like they don't hear it, and they just say that creating hospitals or like you just create. They immediately default to this idea that like you somehow don't care about the poor, and you don't care about the downtrodden, and you don't care about the hungry if you don't have, you don't believe in a system of government, because then they conflate society with government as well, that goes in and at, in this case, gunpoint, or really at the tip of the sword, it extorts the charity from people. Because, well, it goes towards the greater good. It's we have very, very few things that we kind of agree to collectively. Like, there's collective defense and stuff like that, but there's is never been the case of someone providing like a medical service to somebody, saying that somebody has a right to XYZ medical service, medication, drug. Like, yeah, I think people do absolutely deserve to have access to the drugs and stuff and the medical care that they need. I also believe fully that the people providing it deserve to be compensated. And I think, that doesn't mean I don't care about somebody who's sick, It's that's like saying a doctor who won't work for free. Well, he must just want people to die, because he's got the means to save somebody's life, and he's not doing it, or I should say he's doing it for a price. So therefore, it's not virtuous. And it's kind of silly, most doctors, lots of doctors dedicate their time and expertise, and I've had personal doctors help me out when I was in a jam and stuff like that. It's not, their time is really valuable, and they often give it to you in ways that you don't even think that normally would be something that's charged, but you might get a phone call and they might skip a whole visit, and it's like good luck finding an attorney who will do that for you, who will just call you and tell you 15 minutes of whatever they whatever they need and whatever you needed to know, and then not send you a bill. Like there's it's silly to me to think that basically using the government to compel doctors to do things for free or for a limited amount, or even worse in a lot of ways, because it's going and saying, okay, well, the doctors, they're going to demand whatever they're going to demand, and we're going to guarantee that it gets paid, that whatever they're doing or selling for that price, by then going to somebody who has the wealth and extorting it from them through taxes, because Jimmy needs his medication, right? When really you could just that's not virtue. That's literally going out of your way to find somebody who has what you want to give, and taking it from them and giving it to somebody else. And in particularly the New Testament, there's no examples of that. There's absolutely no examples of that. And at no point does Christ call for collective action. At no point does he call for the government to step in and make laws demanding things. He at no point does he say basically to his followers and to the people who don't follow me, force them. That never once occurs. And that's because that's not virtuous. That's not virtue. That's not individuality. That would be collectivist. And I'm kind of disturbed and kind of baffled that this is really where we're at, where it's okay if you want to reject the notion of individual responsibility from Christ. That's fine. I'm not saying you have to believe that. But to take his name and to say that this, you are doing, you're by basically creating a system of government that seizes from the productive to give to the people who you think is somehow virtuous. It's not you casting your vote costs nothing, but you actually going out of your way to help somebody, that actually costs something. So that's actually what virtue is, as opposed to just, setting up a government system that just extorts the money from whoever they need it to pay for whatever they need to pay for. That's not at all That's not at all virtue, you know. I don't think it's, you know, the government does some okay things. I don't think it's virtuous of me to say, well, I'm glad taxes do this. You know, like I'm glad taxes provide essentially, you know, let's say the Navy, right? I'm glad they provide the Navy because that secures our international trade routes, and that helps us and the rest of the free world greatly. But what and I think that's a good thing. But what I don't think is that I'm more virtuous because I support, you know, taxes paying for that. That doesn't make me special, you know. In fact, I'm not involved really with that at all, other than paying the taxes on it. But I'm not the one who's out there actually protecting people, and I'm not the one who's making the millions of dollars that basically go pay for the ships and stuff we need. It's not virtuous for me to say, well, you know, I guess you just, you know, I guess you hate. I guess I'm a better person than you because I support this and you don't. And that's exactly what these socialists are saying, and they're conflating. They're conflating charity with government structure, and they're conflating, or I should say, they're just straight up lying that Jesus was somehow collectivist in nature when he wasn't. He was completely individualistic, and it's almost like when I interact with these people, it's like they don't hear, like they don't even understand what I'm saying, which is when they completely ignored that Jesus gave free healthcare. Yeah, Jesus did. The state is Jesus. At no point was the state. They ask him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He says he's the king of his kingdom. He never says, "Well, I'm king of the world, people." You know, like you have to do as I say, or I'll be like, because if that's the case, why would he have died and gone to heaven? If somebody that powerful came down to earth and they had the ability to then, you know, heal everybody and do all these special things, right? And because, you know, Jesus, you're telling me God doesn't have the power to, you know, heal the sick and feed the hungry and you know, house the poor and stuff. Like, you're telling me Jesus didn't have the power to do those things? Of course he did. But he knew there's no virtue in forcing that upon everyone. So he calls on you as an individual to go make these things happen, not, you know, vote for somebody else to go do it for you. He doesn't, you know, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, okay, if you really think that, like, you know, because he gave free healthcare, now that compels you to force somebody else to give somebody free healthcare. First of all, there's no such thing as free healthcare. It always costs something. And even if you want to argue, it costs Jesus time to do that, right? He had to walk up and do what he's got to do, right? And he typically wasn't in multiple places at once. I mean, could you imagine what the actual monetary value of a healing like that is worth? It's not like he's given that, you know, he did give something away, true. But that, because he can give it away, it's not free, right? I mean, the things that are free are essentially, you know, being baptized and, you know, like being saved, like that's free. He gives that to everybody, and that doesn't cost anything. But everything else, it absolutely costs. You know, it doesn't make any sense to me that these people they're so indignant, they're so self-righteous, and yeah, oh, there we go. Oh, he surely wasn't a capitalist. 95 likes. No, I mean, you can argue like whether he was capitalistic or not. I think you can, but he definitely wasn't. I mean, if that's your counter argument to saying he wasn't a socialist, like what is your definition of capitalist? You think it's just somebody who just like lets the poor die or something? Like, you just buy into the Soviet propaganda? Because that's kind of what it comes down to now, is that it's not just people disagreeing about how to go about things. It's that, or you know, wanting to implement a greater welfare state. It's actually a fundamental misunderstanding of what capitalism is. Capitalism evil because they told, you know, Forget the fact less people starve under capitalism. Forget the fact that there's actual class mobility. Forget all the good things about capitalism. It's just because it's not, the government isn't forcing people to do stuff at gunpoint. There isn't, a bloated universal healthcare system like the one they have in Britain that's crashing and burning. That somehow makes it less virtuous. And it kind of annoys me. Or I should say it really annoys me, because it's these people are telling us that, basically we're bad Christians because we wish to give of ourselves instead of using the force of the government to take from somebody else. And that somehow makes us bad Christians. Or we didn't read the Bible. I got news. I don't know what you guys read, but that's at no point does really any government system even come up, but particularly something that's as collectivist as socialism. I mean, I guess I'm repeating at this point, but it's like Jesus Christ was an absolute individualist. He called on the individuals to basically follow him for their individual salvation. He never said, okay, so enough of the Jews do this, then the Jews are saved. And, the lower classes, they can't go to hell. They're fine. And they don't really have to do anything because they don't have anything to give. So they don't have to, they don't really have to be virtuous because, they're just struggling to survive. And the wealthy, we should have the Romans going, cutting down the excess wealth they have, and then using the tax collectors to redistribute the wealth. One of his disciples was a tax collector. Or I should say his apostles. Like this wasn't. Wouldn't a more virtuous thing for him to do would have been for him to leave the tax collector to his work, and because he's taking money and he's paying taxes, and then those taxes go to keep up the roads and security and the outreach that the Romans were doing, or in the Jews' case in Israel, the Pharisees. Like, wouldn't that have been, like the Pharisees? They're the ones who took care of the poor, right? I mean, they were the church. He was pretty harsh on the self-righteousness of them, and that's kind of what I see here. It's almost like people don't understand the message. And I don't know if any of these people are religious or are not religious, but it's disturbing to see the non-religious come in, and then they start dropping their Stephen Colbert memes and crap, right? And the religious supposedly come in, and then that reinforces what these other people think. They think that the right has this vision of Jesus where he's like toting guns and I don't know what they think. Jesus, the point of Jesus was that we have to, as individuals, follow him, not force other people to do it. It doesn't, like, if you want to get together with a group of people and you guys want to throw your money in a fund to then basically provide a charity or a service to somebody, do that. Go ahead. That is actually virtuous because you're volunteering your money. But if you say, I love this charity so much that I'm going to then force the other half of the people who don't want to do it that way to contribute to it, it's no longer virtue. It's no longer Christ-like, really. This is what kills me. The Democrats, they're convinced they got the popular vote, right? Fine. Why don't you guys? Why don't we make you already have the party structure. So I don't even need to. You've got, you'll spend billions and billions of dollars on outreach for voter registration and all this other BS, right? What if you guys just put together like a Patreon, right? That was like every month you can sign up to donate a certain amount of money, and some of it goes to a healthcare program, some of it goes for the unprivileged or underprivileged or people who need it. Let's just say some of it goes. You can like check off what things you want to give it to. I think some programs should be like that on the government level. But like if you were the Democrat Party and you were doing that, right? And then you guys collected the money, and you actually went out and actually helped people, and you donated your time, and you donated the money because it was just coming directly for you. Nobody's forcing you to give it. It's not a tax moving or anything like that. And then you guys went out and you actually took care of the sick, fed the hungry, did all these extra things, right? That you probably then, that would probably put you guys in a pretty good position. You'd probably have more and more people, signing up to be Democrats because they want to be part of this, charity, right? But if you're literally saying, well, we would love to do that, but we won't do that ourselves unless basically we force everybody else to do that. That's not virtue. That's just basically that's selfishness. It's basically I think this should be done, and I won't do it unless everybody else is doing it. And you'll notice if you look at basically Republican households versus Democrat households. Republican households tend to do, one, they tend to be more religious. Two, they tend to donate more to charity. They just do. And this is completely anecdotal, and I won't out these people. But I had done some work for a nonprofit when I got out of school. Lovely people. It was a charity, and it was an arts charity. I really enjoyed it. Really great people, great experience. And I was the outreach coordinator, so I had to call different places, and some of it was basically asking for donations, ad buys, that kind of stuff. And it was interesting. It was an experience. And I talked to the founders because it was a small group. It's I was number 3 for a minute. Because I just it was just a little office. It wasn't like it was a huge charity organization or anything. And we were talking about basically different politicians that they petitioned to get some support from. And I said, I was like, well, I know there's NEA stuff that's written off for the arts. I said, do you guys qualify for that? Not that I supported that even being the case. And they said, well, it's really tough. And they said they'll go to the Democrats, or they'll go to somebody like Bob Casey, who's still is our one of our senators from PA. And they will say, okay, we're going to put some legislation forward to earmark some money or some rules or something to try to get it to you. And inevitably that takes too long and it fails. Or if it does happen, it usually it never pans out the way it's supposed to. But they will have no problem reaching into the public, into the taxpayer fund to try to, give money to help this virtuous cause. Now, the Republicans, they said when they talked to, and these are liberal people. They've never voted for the Republican in their entire life, I guarantee you. And I said, well, what's the experience with the Republicans? She said, well, the Republicans, they don't, the Republican congressmen and senators, they don't want to touch basically programs and stuff. They don't want to allocate money. But what they will do more often than not is they'll just cut you a personal check right on the spot and say, good luck. And that was interesting because and that really made me think. And I was like, so the Democrats will then say, they want to have the photo op and the virtue of saying, I got this bill passed to make taxpayers give you a certain amount of whatever. But the Republican just basically writes them a check and says, get the hell out of here from their own money. And it's like, well, that seems, while one seems more, politically rewarding and more grandeur to it, and the other seems maybe a little, I don't say crude, but almost dismissive. It's like, well, what the Republican people were doing, the Republican politicians are doing, that sounds to me way more virtuous than trying to basically get the taxpayer on the hook, because they just, they give what they want to give to help, and then whether if they like it or don't like it, and then it's a personal thing, and then that's how, and then they were networked with some other people and who were they played both sides of the aisle because they were, it was a neutral charity. It didn't have anything to do with politics. Thank God. And it's just like that's the kind of stuff I've now seen firsthand. And that's really what I see being reflected here, where it's people who think it's virtuous to take money from somebody else and redistribute it for the greater good, more virtuous than it would be to just reach into your own pocket and make sure, or donate your own time to go make sure something happens. That you want to happen, right? So that's my complaint about essentially this BS socialist Jesus idea. Christians really reading this, they should really, and even non-Christians, because a lot of these people are not Christian. They're basically in name only. Sino, I've seen that. It's not as good as Rhino. We should really push back on this, because there's nothing virtuous about socialism. There's nothing virtuous. And there's really nothing virtuous, essentially, about capitalism either. But what capitalism does is it gives you the freedom to actually enact your virtue, as opposed to socialism, where they collectively decide what the virtue is and then force people to participate, which is not virtue. It makes people feel good, but that's definitely not virtue. So, all right, that's all for now. Food for thought.